Evening, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of the Governance and Audit Committee on the 13th of May 2025. I'm Councillor Chris Pearson, Councillor for Beerchurch, and I chair the Governance and Audit Committee. Just a bit of housekeeping. In the event of any emergency, and we're not expecting a practice alarm this evening, then please evacuate the building either via the rear staircase or the main staircase, and then congregate in the car park at the rear of the town hall. The meeting is being held in the grand jury room at the town hall and is being broadcast over the council's YouTube and will be available to watch as long as YouTube continues to exist, I imagine. Please, would speakers therefore use the microphones at all time when speaking, but remember to turn them off when not. Members of the committee are invited to, and members of the public are invited to use electronic devices should they wish, but please set them to silent. If they do make a noise during the meeting, you will be expected to make a contribution to the Mayor's coffers. There are toilets on every floor in the building and an induction loop in this room, so everything should be audible to all members and any member of the public who's attending. Just going to invite people starting on my left to introduce themselves to everyone and to anybody who's watching. Richard.
Good evening, Richard Block, Chief Operating Officer.
Good evening, Councillor Paul Smith, St Anne's and St John's Ward.
Councillor Sean Kelly, Wivenhoe Ward.
Good evening, Councillor Paul Dundas, Tiptree Ward.
Good evening, Councillor Sarah Naylor, Lexton and Braeswood Ward.
Councillor William Sunnox, Rural North Ward.
Sam McLean, Councillor for Newtown Christchurch Ward.
Hello, I'm Paul Atkinson, Deputy Section 151 Officer.
Good evening, Emma Sandro, Interim CFO, Section 151.
I'm Matthew Evans, Democratic Services Officer.
Welcome all. I'm not aware of any substitutions, so there aren't any this evening. Just before I start with the rest of the agenda, I just want to inform everyone that I've taken the decision, along with our Democratic Services Officer, that we will swap around the agenda somewhat, and the amphora items will now go to the end of the public meeting, so that the confidential items can be gone straight into as soon as we've dealt with the public matters. So item 7 will now go at the end of the public agenda. Item 3, urgent items. I'm not aware of any, Mr. Evans. Okay. Declarations of interest. There's a bit of a... Paul, could I ask you just to turn your microphone off, please? Thank you. Declarations of interest. Does anyone have anything they wish to declare? Nope. Moves us on to item 5, minutes of the meeting held on the 17th of December 2024. First of all, anything anyone wants to raise with those minutes? No, I'm not seeing anything. So can I just get agreement from everyone that those are entered into the record? I'm seeing nods, thank you. And the minutes of the 21st of January 2025, again, anything? No? Can I get nods of agreement that those are? That's good, thank you. Okay, that takes us on to item 6, have your say, and I've had an indication of one have your say this evening, just double checking. Yep. And that's Councillor Kufoglu. Please come up, Kamal. You know the routine. Once you're settled in, I'll ask you to begin.
Thank you. Dear colleagues, during the last budget discussions which took place on 26th of February, the Labour Group leader, Councillor Julie Young, submitted an amendment to the main item asking that the Council makes a one-off payment of £120,000 to 2 projects based in her own ward, managed by charities and organisations run by her fellow Labour ward colleague and her husband. Before the budget meeting, I made inquiries about whether potential conflicts of interest had been declared, and I found that that wasn't the case. However, this then led to a fellow Greenstead colleague declaring a potential conflict of interest and leaving the chambers during discussions and voting. During this meeting, the proposer of this amendment stretched the strict rules for making changes to amendments on the day, noting that there has been a typo. However, in reality, the change was not a simple typo, but a complete change in the name of the recipient organisation. Leader of the Labour Group asked for an allocation of £100,000 for building improvements in one project and a further £20,000 for purchasing a vehicle for another project. £120,000 is a significant amount, far exceeding what other charities and CICs are normally allocated after annual applications. Because the suggested amount is not from our existing money, but rather the reserves we are keeping for bad days, I noted that additional scrutiny was appropriate. It was also acknowledged that making a one-off payment of £100,000 would roughly increase the annual revenue of the organisation in question by a whopping 50%. Therefore, on behalf of the Green Group, I requested some explanation and justification for the spending, including the organisation's outreach, why did these 2 projects catch the proposer's attention, how this need was identified, and how were these numbers calculated. None of these questions was answered satisfactorily either before or after the meeting. During this meeting, however, we were reassured by the leadership of the Council that this proposal, which was approved by a majority of councillors, would be scrutinised and reviewed by the Governance and Audit Committee. My point of view remains the same. While I'm in favour of supporting vulnerable and diverse communities, unfortunately I did not and still do not believe that using a full council meeting for such proposal and funding is the right way or platform to favour a charity and make a decision without having an evidence-based objective consideration. Therefore, tonight I'm here to ask the status of the funding approved back in February, find out when and where it will be scrutinised, and what options and power will the committee have over the final decision. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Kamal. The first thing I would say is that any question that you have around the current budget, which is what the full council agreed to in February, should go to Cabinet. There will be a report to Governance and Audit Committee about the outturns for Q1, Q2, Q3 and Q4 over the course of the current municipal year, and we'll certainly have a look at those. All of the items that went before full council in February were agreed by all members of the council, albeit some may have voted against, but the majority of members present voted for the budget that was approved to go forward as the revenue budget for this current financial year. And that's about all I could say at this stage, I'm afraid. Councillor Smith, unusual for a member to have but I'll allow you to, as you're a member of the Cabinet.
Thank you. I'm not speaking as a member of the Cabinet. It strikes me that the issue is one of procurement here, which is something that all members have got an interest in, that it's quite right that the council has made a decision, but he raises some concerns about whether it is being procured in accordance with our correct procedures. I'm sure that is the case, but I think a report demonstrating that the procurement takes place fully in accordance with our rules, because it has been made, in fairness to all members, including those who have an interest in this case, that everyone needs to be seen that it's being done absolutely fairly, is something that would be appropriate. Whether we take it here as an item of potential for the work programme for next year or through scrutiny panel, I'm happy to take guidance from officers. But I do think, given that the concerns have been raised, we should look at the procurement of these two items and ensure that we are following the procurement rules absolutely correctly.
I agree, and I think it's also imperative that not only do all members believe that any expenditure is transparent, above board, but also that every resident of Colchester takes that view as well. So I'm happy to ensure, and I'm sure that our Section 151 officer will ensure in the accounts that come before the committee that we have a full appreciation for how that money is spent and that it is spent above board. My understanding of the £100,000 is that it wasn't just a one-off, that it was to carry on over a period of time to support individuals who were moving into council-owned and maintained and sustained properties. Do you want to come back?
No, thank you. I would like to thank both you, Chair, and also Councillor Smith for his clarifications and suggestions. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Kamal. Right, so as I say, item 7, we will now move to the last item on the agenda. That moves us on to item 8, 1, quarter 3 budget monitoring report. Hannah, over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Before I go in and do some headlines on Q3, I just wanted to make some opening comments, if I may. Just to say that this is an old report. We are long past Q3, and I don't think it's appropriate moving forward that we bring reports so late to the Audit Committee. It makes this information rather meaningless, and I know that you all want more relevant, up-to-date information in order to make some decent decisions, and you won't get that from this report. However, it's prudent that we do talk about it, and what it will do is give you some information about the kinds of things that will be trending through the outturn report. We're in the throes of pulling together the year-end outturn report. I don't have a position yet, but I am planning to bring that to the 17th of June Audit and Governance Committee. Since I started about 3.5 months ago, I've been making lots of improvements, and we know that there are a lot of things to fix, and we will talk about that as well later on the agenda, and the auditors will also, as part of their reports, raise some issues that we are starting to come to grips with around capacity and capability, and the perpetual underfunding of the finance function, and we need to ensure that we have a fit-for-purpose finance function, and some people development, particularly leading into LGR. And I have brought a team of people in to fix that. I have some with me tonight. I have Paul, my deputy, and I've got a couple of my team members on the screen, Darren and Hussein. Darren leads the business partner team, and Hussein is our newly appointed chief accountant, who is integral in terms of the accounts, particularly for 24-25. My other very early observation was that there is not any regular financial reporting to SLB or the leadership team, and the reporting that comes here is old, as I've said, but also a bit waffly and confusing. So we're planning to change all of that as part of the work that we are doing, and I look forward to bringing you the more relevant outturn report on the 17th of June committee. Now, in terms of headlines on Q3, I will take the report as read, but I think there is some important headlines to give you. This was the forecast position at Q3, and at that point in time, the best that we could forecast was that we believed there was going to be a circa 1.96 million overspend to the general fund. All the detail is set out in paragraph 6.1 and appendix A and B of the report. However, in terms of headlines, we were at Q3 forecasting a circa £1.7 million overspend in housing, and we all know the ever-increasing demand on homelessness and TA. Circa 700,000 overspend in place and prosperity, largely due to 500k pressures relating to the local plan and some income shortfall in planning. About 500,000 overspend in corporate services, and there has been some pressure due to some interims in finance, as I've said previously, that I've had to bring in to shore up the finance function at this point in time. And we've also had some shortfall in staff car parking income. About 300,000 overspent in modern city services, which mainly relate to income shortfall in building control and some other agency costs, particularly in food and safety, following an FSA audit to increase resources. And then finally, about £200,000 overspend in Enjoy Colchester, driven by some loss of income due to temporary pool closure and exacerbated by some shortfall in income from Colchester Museum. This is all offset by about £1.5 million underspend in corporate financing costs because of the slippage in our capital program, and also £400,000 additional pressure as a result of the 24-25 pay award being greater than budget assumptions. I also want to note that at Q3, the forecast position assumed that if everything is as planned and forecast materialises as planned and no other income comes into the council, that we would have no choice but to go to reserves to cover the overspend, because we have to have a balanced position. But we are working through that at this point in time. In terms of just some quick notes around capital, against the general fund reprofiled capital budget of circa 36 million, at Q3 we were forecasting £17 million slippage, and I use that word purposely. It's not an underspend, it's slippage. And the details can be found in Appendix E of the report, but it's mainly in the areas of the disabled facilities grant, Fieldgate Key, and about 5 million in fleet replacement. The HRA revenue is forecast to be balanced, and HRA capital is also showing slippage of about 23 million against a capital budget of 71 million, largely due to slippage in the home improvement program and in the council build program. And I want to leave it at that. Thank you, Chair, and take any questions.
Thank you. And I'd just like to take this opportunity to welcome Paul, Hussein and Darren to the meeting this evening. And just remind everyone that in the preamble we've been reminded that this is quarter 3. We'll probably have quarter 4 before not too long, where we'll be able to go into a bit more detail about how we ended up the full year, which I think will probably give us a better picture of where we're at, what we need to be concerned about. So I'm just suggesting that we probably don't want to spend a great deal of time on this item given other items that we have before us this evening. Councillor Sunnucks, I see your hand.
Yes, and welcome, and congratulations on beginning to get your head around it all, and very much support the idea of trying to get the reporting a bit quicker, and I think KPMG have recognised that as well. So that's all good stuff. Reporting to the senior leadership team, I'd never thought of that before. I never thought that that we're actually getting the reporting coming here. I would hope it would be the same reporting, and that you wouldn't put all the interesting stuff to the senior leadership team and further outlaw the oppositions, such as myself and my colleagues on this side. There's a few little bits of background. Before you came, we had some quite passionate exchanges about reserves and about making sure that we budget the reserve movements and see what's going on there. We're sitting here with a Q3 outturn, and the reserves, you've given us some guidance in the words here, but we don't really know what's going to happen with the reserves. We got that 3 million of business rates benefit coming our way, got 1.4 million of something else, I think it's Turnstone, isn't it? and 1.2 million of something else. So all these things are swirling around. The big stuff is going, we're given all the budget crunching, the small variances when there's been a bit more on consultancy here or a bit more on that, on this or that. But the big stuff is going on in those reserves. And I feel if we're going to be really getting to grips with it, we need to try and get that out into the budgeting earlier. Yeah.
Absolutely, Councillor Sunnock, and that's one of the things that my colleague Darren is working through at the moment. We're working through the outturn position, and the way I operate is complete transparency. So I intend to show you the movements in the reserves. So we're going to have what I call a gross outturn position, where we end up at year end on an actual basis, and movements in and out of reserves. So you can see what we put aside for various items of expenditure that were either planned. I hope they were all planned. There might be some that have been unplanned because we set the budget so long ago. But I intend to show those to come to a bottom movement, which is likely to be an overspend, I have to say. It's probably not going to be an underspend, but if it was an underspend or overspend, either way, it's a contribution to and from reserves to bring you a balanced position. So I will be completely transparent, and whether it's planned or not planned, I will show that position.
Absolutely excellent. We're on the same wavelength then, and we need to, going through the year, need to try and get a feel of what the reserves are doing. The next thing is the budget. What is the budget? And following up from Councillor Kafoglu, if he's still here. Has he gone? He's gone. When we did the budget debate, there were some amendments submitted by the Labour group for fairly small amounts of money, and they were approved. There were a lot of other amendments promised by the portfolio holder verbally, and they were like 2 million and 2 million, about 6 million, I think, in total, which were promised verbally. They weren't written anywhere, and we assume that those are not part of the budget, but that's something that needs clarifying with the administration and with the Labour group. So there were promises made, highly politically attractive promises for, for community centres and that type of thing, promised verbally that were not in the words, and as far as I'm concerned, were not in the budget.
And you're referring to 25-26 budget, aren't you? Not 24-25 is what we're talking about tonight. Absolutely, and we were talking about that today, weren't we? Because they were reflected in the minutes. The budget report wasn't amended, but we are doing that reconciliation as part of our budget process, which we are talking about. So that information will come through, and we make sure that we'll go back and reconcile any changes that were made at that final meeting on the 25-26 budget.
So we would expect to only see what was written and approved, and not the words or the minutes becoming the budget. Because that was, that sort of scale of adjustment just made off the cuff. I mean, I just didn't recognise the figures at the time and look back. Okay.
Councillor Sunnock, I appreciate your wanting to ask the questions, but we're looking at the 23-24 Q3 outturn this evening.
Okay, just going on then, the capital underspend is absolutely massive, and so in addition there was about 30 odd million carried forward from last year into this year, and the two added together gave you 68 million or something like that, and then we only spent 27 million of that, and a lot of that went forward into the future, and it seems to be in the economic growth area. So we've still got a huge problem with our capital programme, which has been hanging over us since 2022, when it was raised in the peer review.
Well aware of that, Councillor Sunnock. It seems to be a perpetual problem in local government. Not that that makes it okay. We don't help ourselves by taking some big carry forwards into the following year, because it's adding to the problem. So one of the pieces of work I want to do, my colleagues are very busy doing all sorts of things at the moment, is to have a proper look at our capital programme and do some work which is more reflective of the reality of the deliverability of the programme and the affordability. So I'm aware of it, it's just not right at the top of the list at the moment, but it will be.
Thank you. My very last point, you'll be really here this time, is the HRA reporting. we got into the habit of just reporting all the financing costs in one line, which includes the capital contribution to reserves. So we always show exactly balanced position. And in that finance line, which I think is about 18 million, there's so many interesting things. So I really think it would be useful to have that broken out so that we can see actually what the surplus or the deficit is on the HRA operating account that we're ploughing back into capital expenditure. And remembering that we've got 1.2 billion of assets at market price tied up there, 400 million at balance sheet value, we'd expect to be seeing a much larger surplus than we are. And I think, and I've said constantly, that I think there's something wrong with the accounting there, something seriously wrong with the way we're dealing major repairs. So a request that as we go forward, if you can try and put it on the list to try and look at how we're depreciating major repairs, what we're capitalising, why it's so much more than we've done in the past, why it's so much more than other councils. And I suspect we might have got a problem there. My ex-auditor's nose is twitching on it.
Thank you, Councillor Sonnett.
Darren, sorry, not to put you on the spot. Is there anything that you want to say? You're the HRA expert.
No, I don't think so. I think we've been through it before, Committee Chair and Anna. I think we're quite comfortable with the way that depreciation works. It's a consistent approach we've taken over the years, audited successfully for a number of years. And when colleagues from Epping Forest were here, it was the same approach that they took. So I think we're comfortable with our approach to depreciation.
Thank you, Darren. Councillor Smith.
Thank you. Dealing with 2 points. The first thing, the Q3 results. Stripping everything else out, basically it's the cost of homelessness that's very nearly the full extent of our overspends, offsetting everything else. And that shows the critical impact that the housing side of the equation is having on the general fund. If we had more housing stock available, we'd be paying out less in temporary accommodation, and we wouldn't therefore not have the deficits that we're getting. And I have to say that figure for the housing side is likely to get worse, not better, despite the mediation that we're taking beyond the box and the issues there. Secondly, on the HRA side of it, valuations of properties are a very interesting subject because our housing stock is not for sale on the general market. It's for renting at heavily subsidised rents. That's the whole point of having the Culture Borough Homes operating it. It's not a commercial operation that's aiming to make a profit. It should certainly be run in a commercial manner, and we should make commercial decisions. And I think when you look at the capital programme, again, some of the issues will come out from the work that's been done on Fit for the Future in looking at our housing stock and seeing which properties are actually in net value, deficit value, in that the cost of repairing them and keeping them in good condition is less than the amount of rent we're getting from them. And that again has to reflect in the valuation. So I think, coming back to it, the key issue seems to be housing here. It's something which this administration is, I feel, taking very, very seriously.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Anything you want? No. Councillor Dundas.
Thank you, and thank you for the report. I'm not going to go through too much the detail of it because, as you say, it's from quite a long time ago now. But I think, and I really welcome your comments about how we need to get so much more up to speed in terms of the timely delivery. Because if we think about it, we set a budget back in February, and we were using, in effect, by not having the Q3. Now, we always use estimates in that budget because we set the budget before the year end. But I don't know if we even had a Q2 report. I can't remember in February. I think we did. But it means, for want of a better description, the opening and closing balances we're using on that budget are based on estimates derived from fairly out-of-date information derived early on in the previous financial year. And just scanning through this, I'm not going to compare them back to back, but I can spot figures in here which are quite different to the ones which were in the budget. So feeding these estimates from Q3 into the budget we passed does alter the budget. You can see the reserves are different. I can see some of the capital programme is different. I remember when we did the Q2 report here, I think we had a number of people report back on the capital programme and assure us that things were about to start. And I'm looking at Q3 and not a pound was spent, so they didn't. And I would encourage you on the capital review, yet another capital review. I think we've been having a capital review since, I don't know, as long as I can remember.
Time immemorial.
Time immemorial, yes. Be realistic, because we have less than 2 years until a new set of councillors are elected, and we will probably effectively be restricted in what we can do as a council, because there will be a new shadow authority already running, getting ready to take over. My comment would be, you know, if you can't get it started and get it done in under 2 years, I'm not quite sure what the point of doing it is, because you're going to run out of time before you get anywhere with it. So why waste time developing it as a project when somebody may well come along in 22 months' time and say, sorry, we don't like that. And it's all wasted time, and it's all wasted money, and all wasted officer work. So that would be my comment on that. On the budget amendments, I know that's strictly a different subject, but yes, obviously we do. If there's big alterations to the budget, and there were very, very big figures, we need to start seeing those come through in actual paperwork and figures fairly promptly. But I could go on, but I think it's probably not a good use of our time. The Q4, I think, I'm really pleased to see that'll be coming soon. And if we start getting up to speed, be looking at more up-to-date information, it will make our decision-making process much sharper, for want of a better description.
Anything you want to come back on?
Just to say, we're thinking about the budget. These are some of the things we've already been talking about. Some of those budget numbers, we inherited those, so we're going to go through and make sure they triangulate. It's one of the things that we are starting to do. The budget will change. We set this budget so long ago. The budget is as good as the assumptions that go into the budget when it's made. It will change. It's our role to make sure that you can see transparently what the movements are and how they've changed and why they've changed, and particularly if there's large variance between particular areas. And there shouldn't be a bottom line impact. But there are all those things that we will bring to you as part of the reporting and part of the budget setting process. So I'm alive to all of those things. And yes, capital is a challenge, isn't it? Particularly moving into LGR. But it is something that we are going to be thinking about, and I have to think about that anyway, because to have an effective capital budget over the next few years, because capital doesn't fall off a cliff, does it? It's a long-term game, and it has long-term implications in terms of capital financing. But we have to do that, set the budget, and to do that, we need to start with 25, 26, the current year, set that, reset that in order to set the budget moving forward. So, yes, is the answer.
Thank you. And I think we'll all be looking forward to your Q4 report. I know we've talked about the capital programme and capital review. So hopefully when we get that Q4 report, it'll be a little bit clearer. Yeah, we were all still in shorts then, weren't we? The one thing that when I looked through this, that I really wanted to highlight tonight, and I think all members of the council should be a little embarrassed by, is the significant area of underspend on disabled facilities grants, where we're showing 5.229 million. Just think there must be ways in which some of that could have been spent by now, and spent in a way that would improve the quality of life for some individuals, some members of the Colchester population. Mark, you want to come in on that? Councillor Corey.
Good evening, Chair and Committee. On that particular issue, it's in relation to Essex County Council, in how we go about spending that money. and residents need to have the assessments done by the occupational health and the different officers from Essex. So just to make clear to the committee, it's not a failure necessarily of Colchester officers, it's not a role that we actually take, it's a pot that we hold and we try and spend the money on. It's something that I've picked up on because I have different roles, one being an Essex County Councillor and two being part of the local health alliance, and I want to see that money being spent as best as possible, but it's not through us not trying. We are trying, and I take the points, but I just wanted to say there's a bit more context. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the clarification, Mark. I just wanted to raise it because I think it's something that we need to be as a council pushing everyone to do their best to ensure, because as I say, it's quality of life for some individuals and significant quality of life for a number of individuals. So anything that we can do as a council and as councillors to ensure that that's at the top of a list of priorities, I think the better. Right, I haven't seen any other... Councillor Kelly.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question for Anna, quite a high level one really. I'm relieved, stroked, really encouraged to see that you've got some people now, because last time you were here, you didn't have anyone really helping you. So now I just thought it was worth noting that they're here, and that's really good. And I was wondering if you could just give an idea of how many more people you think you might need, and sort of where we are in terms of your recruitment programme, because obviously you've got some. Do you need more? How long is that going to take, sort of thing?
I've got another colleague coming in a few weeks who's a commercial guy who used to work for me and will be of great help and highly anticipated by Simon. We're doing a lot of work with on the commercial side with Amphora and other bits of commercial work. Then I think my interim team is complete. I do need to, for the morale of the team and also for the finances, I need to move on to permanent recruitment, and it's going to be tricky given LGR, but we are going out to permanent recruitment soon, aren't we, Paul, for some key roles, and we need to start that process for longevity, but also to give us that continuity in the finances. So we're doing multiple things at the same time, but it was by needs must. We would not have been where we are if I didn't get Paul in, and particularly Hussein, who I know very well, who used to work with me and who's taking control of the 24-25 account. So we needed to ramp up the interim team for speed. Otherwise, we would not be sitting here, and I wouldn't be talking to you about outturn on the 17th of June. So, but we are conscious that we need to start some permanent recruitment and see how we go. I don't know how successful we're going to be, but got to start doing that.
Thank you. I think we just need to be mindful, though, that there is a cost associated with that additional resourcing, which will be reflected in the outturn for the 25-26 financial year. Right. I haven't seen any other hands. I'm presuming that answers your question, Councillor Kelly. So we've got the 4 recommendations, which are mostly just to note and to comment. 2.1 was to note and take account of the position. 2.2 was to consider the position of capital at the end of quarter 3. 2.3 was to consider where we were at with HRA, and we've touched on that, as was 2.4 in terms of HRA capital. All agreed? Yeah? Okay. Councillor Sonnets, was there something you wanted to...
Can we make sure we get it minuted that we're going to try and break down that huge financing cost lump in HRA in the future? We
can put that in the minutes. You've made that request.
I would like that, because I think it's. I've asked for it a few times and it's disappeared.
I think we need to
see
be
how practical it is, and we'll have a look at it.
Yeah, I was going to say, you just need to be mindful of the comments that have just been made by our Section 151 officer about all of the work that's being undertaken by a still fairly stretched finance team. But that request has been made, it will be minuted. Right, that concludes item 8.1, takes us to item 8.2. Amy McGrath to introduce, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, committee. So tonight I've brought to you the annual governance statement for 23-24, and you may recall that this was originally signed off back in June 24 when we set out the review that had been undertaken regarding our governance arrangements and set out the action plan for issues that needed resolving during the financial year of 24-25. Sorry, I just got to get my years right. So in terms of how we carry out our governance statement, the process has been traditionally to undertake the review of our governance and to report back to you at the first available meeting after the annual meeting. And the annual governance statement again goes into our statement of accounts. And that process has been working for several years, and I've been doing this process now for probably 10, and some of you may have been there from the beginning of me doing this. And I think it's fair to say that the process with the annual governance statement and our statement of accounts in the beginning was very joined up and aligned, and over the last few years they've become a little bit separated due to the issues that we are aware of with the auditing of the accounts and the finance team issues. So we've carried on with our governance process, but what that means is we've become out of line with our auditing process, and the new external auditors, KPMG, have reviewed our governance statement for 23-24 to authorise that as part of the statement of accounts, and they've identified some areas of concern that they felt should have been in the governance statement for 23-24. So they've requested some amendments to the statement that you've already signed off. They are highlighted in the covering report for you, and there are 4 particular areas where they are saying that they would like those concerns highlighted, and they are due to the lack of effective counter-fraud processes, timeliness of finance and operation reporting, ineffective oversight of the council's estate, and the capacity and capability of the council's finance team. So they were the 4 key areas that they highlighted as significant weaknesses. So we've gone back and we've amended the annual governance statement for 23-24. Obviously we can't update the action plan because that was for the year that we've just finished. But what we have done is put an amendment in, and you'll see that on page 7 of the annual governance statement itself, where we've put the amendment relating to May 25. And what we've also done is gone over the annual governance statement itself and highlighted where it set out issues with relation to external audit. We've made it clear that that's in relation to the previous external auditors, not to the current ones, to KPMG. So it's unfortunate that we've got out of sync, and what we have done is Anna and I have had several conversations about the annual governance statement, and I've been liaising with KPMG, and as part of the process going forwards, we're going to bring the annual governance statement back in line with the statement of accounts reporting. So you won't see the annual governance statement at the June meeting of governance and audit this year. It will come to you when the statement of accounts is ready, and there'll be further liaison with KPMG before it comes to you, so that any concerns that they have will be raised within the report, and if we haven't identified it, then we've got an opportunity to bring that into the governance statement before you see it, and you authorise it sign off by the leader and the chief executive. I don't think KPMG have criticised what we've done in terms of how our annual governance process works. I think it's a circumstance in terms of how we've got out of sync with the accounts, and I think it's something that has been recognised, especially by this committee during the last year to 18 months, the concerns of, are there things in the accounts that we are unaware of because we haven't got the external audit point of view. So I'm hoping that you don't feel that there's anything too significant in there. The issues that they've highlighted are ones that we accept. They are concerns that you as a committee have been made aware of probably during the 24-25 financial year through our own internal auditing process and also from the reporting that's come to yourselves. So for tonight, it's a request for you to sign off the amended annual governance statement. It is included as part of the later reporting. You'll see that later on in the agenda, you've got the full KPMG report, so more detail is available in there. And I'm open to any questions.
Thank you, Hayley. Yeah, and I think those of us who've sat around this committee table for the last couple of years will recognise all of the high-risk areas that are highlighted in the report. I suppose for me, the one about counter-fraud is probably the one that I was least aware of, but certainly timeliness of financial and operational reporting, ineffectiveness of oversight of the council estate, although I'm sure that Councillor Sunnox will agree with me that the overview group that's now looking at that has a clear idea of where we sit in terms of monitoring and oversight of the council's estate. But also we've already heard this evening about the issues around capacity and capability of the council's finance team. That's something that doesn't come as a surprise, I would hope, to any of us around the table. Open to other comments and questions. Councillor Sunnox.
Yes, very sensible to bring it in line and beginning to get the accounts to actually be part of the governance system, whereas I think previously they were regarded as a bit of a sort of cul-de-sac somewhere over there. I think that this statement still doesn't really show that the penny's dropped on how serious the position on our accounts has been. And that, it says that the disclaimed accounts have been signed off by the auditors. Well, they haven't been signed off. They've been disclaimed by the auditors. And then it goes on to say, well, it's not specific to Colchester City Council, so that's sort of okay. The fact is we've had a massive breakdown in our finance function, and it was hidden for 2 years. That's a pretty serious gap in governance, and you are meant to disclose these things in your governance statements. So I thought, I'll support passing it, but this is a bit of a whitewash in my view, and the other big thing, and I've been raising this for ages and I haven't had a good reply, is, yeah, we're beginning to get to grips with the corporate landlord model dealing with the general fund properties, but the HRA properties are still sitting in the HRA. Our governance is all still focused on the managing agent, Colchester Borough Homes. The HRA is sitting there with the biggest item on our balance sheet, and we don't really have any governance on it. We got this HRA review that's been rolling on and on and on. I don't think the HRA plans work economically. We should be, as a committee, when that review finally comes forward, we should be scrutinising it and, understanding it. You might say it's a scrutiny panel function because it's forward-looking, but there is certainly the lack of governance over the HRA, over our biggest asset, I would say was a major hole and ought to be mentioned in future governance statements. And it'd be lovely to have to hear a plan as to how we're going to get round it in the same way as we're trying to get round the general fund estate.
Thank you, Councillor Sunnox. I'm not sure that you're the right person to respond, but I'm happy to give you the opportunity to.
It was just actually on the first comments, the HRA part, no, I'm not the right person to respond. That's for other areas, but I will take that forward as part of the review work that I'm doing. So I will have those conversations and we'll put that into the auditing programme that we've got. But what I wanted to do, Councillor Sunnox, and for the committee, is to give you the assurance that the issues that were raised by KPMG, this isn't a whitewash to deal with them and move on. They'll be included in the annual governance review that we do for 24-25. So the issues and concerns that have come up through the KPMG process and how that's been managed would actually be recognised in the governance statement that will come to you later on in the year. So those issues will be carried forward. The concerns that you've raised about the seriousness of them will be recognised in the annual governance statement, but obviously I can't go back and rewrite the whole annual governance statement for 23-24, but what we will do is recognise those issues have been highlighted in the extreme in 24-25.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you. My first point is a very small one. On page 75, we seem to go from point 9 to point 15 in the agenda, which I'm assuming doesn't mean there's a whole chunk that's been missed out of Councillor Smith and Sunnux's praising each other's fine financial knowledge or whatever. Moving on to the more serious stuff, and this is serious. The auditors have found some serious weaknesses, some of which I think we are very well aware of. The timeliness and lack of financial reporting, absolutely. The capacity issues, absolutely. This is not a whitewash. And unaccustomed as I am to defending auditors' judgments on some of these matters, you know, they've set some serious targets here, and I want to know how we're ensuring that we're monitoring to ensure that we are covering all these areas and concentrating on the key issues that they've raised and not disappearing off down any rabbit holes that any other councillors might want to come up with. So I'd like to know how we're going to monitor this stuff, please.
Thank you. Hayley?
So in terms of my role of monitoring, it will be through the auditing process and it'll be through the governance process. So my reporting back to yourselves in terms of the 6 monthly reporting that we do. Senior leadership board and team will be doing the internal reporting, and I'm sure Richard will be able to give you more detail on that. And I just wanted to clarify one point about the counter fraud, and in terms of the fact that you probably weren't aware of that as much as you are of the other items, and that's because it was an internal audit report that was raised during the 24-25 financial year. So it wasn't a report that was available during 23-24. It's part of the reporting process. So coming to you as part of the year-end report, because it was the kind of the middle of the year, so it wasn't available for the 6 monthly one. But obviously those issues were still there in 23-24, which is why KPMG have raised them.
Thank you. Councillor Dundas.
Yeah, thank you. I'll be brief. I think that this is slightly straight into the next item, actually. But just to reiterate, I mean, the statement talks a lot about the problem with the external audit and the problems with that all councils have had with obtaining external audits. But just to go forward a little bit to the disclaimer, one of the weaknesses identified by KPMG actually says, the Council published its draft statement of accounts for 23-24 on the 22nd of November 24, which was 5.5 months late compared to the statutory deadline of the 31st of May 24. The statement of accounts were not published by the backstop. It then goes on to say, these initial draft accounts presented for public scrutiny contained casting errors throughout. Now, in layman's terms, that means they didn't add up. Now, that is pretty serious, that we have internally produced accounts which didn't add up. That's not an audit problem. That's a Colchester City Council problem. And, you know, we have to accept that. And I know it is accepted, but we have to be sure that the annual government statement does really reflect that.
Thank you. We've already had an indication this evening that as much as is possible, that is being put right going forward. And we were all aware around this table of some issues with the pressure on the finance team. But I think also some of that was exacerbated by the difficulty of getting our accounts audited, not for 1 year, not for 2 years, and not on time for 3 years, which made it difficult for us to have a full appreciation of what was going on. And I think what I would say at this stage, before we move on to the next item, is that we should be, I think, more reassured by the activity and the work that's being undertaken and is being reported back to us by KPMG over the past, 18 months now. But I think we're starting to see a picture that we can have more trust and faith in as it comes to us. And I think that's all, with all due respect to our previous finance team. I think we should thank Anna and Emma for the work that they've been doing to date. I'm not seeing any other members indicating, so I'm just going to bring Richard Block in at this stage.
Thank you, Chair. So just to reiterate Hayley's point around the Senior Leadership Board having a real focus on this, and hopefully you can see that what's been said by our Chief Finance Officer, that improvements are already being made to respond to these issues, as well as the corporate landlord. And indeed, I've also received a request for further resource from the governance team to deal with these counter-fraud issues, but we will potentially need some resource to deal with these issues. I'll just make that point. Thank you.
Right, thank you. So we're asked to review and agree the revised annual governance statement for 23-24 as indicated to us in that lengthy document at the end of this item. All agreed? Yeah, I think that's unanimous. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Hayley. That takes us on to item 8.3, final statement of accounts and draft audit plan. Emma, Hannah, do you want to join us, please? So welcome, both of you. I know you've provided us with several detailed and lengthy documents. There was just one clarification that I wanted, and that is that in, I think, at least two of the documents, it refers to them being presented to this committee at its March meeting rather than its May meeting. So just so that anybody who is watching or for the minutes knows that they were presented here rather than in March. And I'll leave it to you to introduce. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So you've obviously got the full set of accounts there, which I won't touch on. Anna might want to say some words to those, but if I just go through our series of documents. So I'm going to take these as read in the main, and there's a few which are here really for formality, given where we are with these accounts. So if we just start on the first document, which starts on page 219 of the pack, this is our audit plan for the 23-24 accounts. Obviously, in an ideal world, this would have come to you about a year ago or even earlier. Due to the circumstances everybody here is aware of, we were unable to do that, but we are required to present an audit plan to the committee. So that is what this is here for. I'm not suggesting we talk about that any further today. We will come back to the 24-25 plan later. So if I then take you down to long documents to our page, so the next item we've got is on page 249. So this is the management letter here. This is a standard representation letter, which is essentially saying that these are the various representations that Anna will confirm to us in terms of the preparation of those accounts. That is pretty standard. There's no specific representations in there, nor is there any adjustments for the fact that it is a disclaimed audit opinion. If I then take us through to our main report today, which starts on 257 of the pack. So this is our year-end summary report. So I think it's important just to pause on page 260 of the main pack, which just sort of sets out where we are in terms of the backstop. So as the committee is aware, there was a backstop implementation in terms of the end of February, for which all accounts needed to be completed or disclaimed. For Colchester, we were unable to meet that backstop date because the accounts were not finalised by that point for, again, reasons that have been discussed before. What that does mean, though, and what we've just set out here, is what does the impact of that mean going forward, and also on the accounts. So the fact that you have got a fully disclaimed audit opinion for the 23-24 accounts, which means that we essentially were unable to complete any audit work other than basic planning procedures. So the summary that we've put on page 262 of the report just really sets out those areas that we did identify in that planning documentation as where we would have, if we'd been able to complete a full audit, would have identified and done further work on. Just again to say we haven't done any work in any of those areas because you have got a fully disclaimed audit opinion. What we did do, though, where we have done some work I think as was noted previously, is some of the sort of planning procedures, but also we did do a review of the accounts, and we did identify, and I would say quite significant numbers of sort of casting errors and various things. So they were all fixed, and I would say that actually Paul and the team did deal with those, considering they were not his set of accounts, very promptly for us, and we got through all of those, and obviously we are comfortable with the set that will be signed in terms of those all being resolved. I think what is, and we've touched on this already, there's a few number of sort of areas that we have raised through the work that we have done in our reflections on the audit process, and we have set some of those out on page 264 onwards. So we've mentioned this multiple times, but the capacity and capability within that finance team, Anna is coming in, is obviously very quickly strengthening that team, and we have already seen, I think it is worth us saying, significant changes in the amount of work that we've been able to do for 24-25 audit already. So a recommendation that is fully accepted by Anna and is obviously already in the process of being implemented and addressed. The second one there, again, already touched on, is around local counter fraud. We pull this out here because obviously we do look at fraud arrangements as part of the audit process, and again, a fully accepted recommendation which was already accepted as part of that internal audit review. And the last one there, again, review of the statutory accounts. Again, I have every faith that that will be improved for this year, just through the changes that we are already seeing within the finance team. So what we then set out in the report is a summary on value for money, but I'll come back to that if that's all right, Chair, in terms of the annual audit report, because that's where the detailed work is in there. But the other things I think just to note for you within our document probably is worth committee members just having a read of the appendix, particularly around sort of reset and recovery phases, just to give you that update to terms of what you can expect over the coming years in terms of local government reset and how the journey to getting a unmodified opinion might look like going forward. So other than, I think, just on page 277, which just confirms our independence to you as your auditors, and it is probably just worth saying that obviously the audit fees are set out on page 20. These will be confirmed through the PSAA process, but what I have set out here is essentially you had a scale rate. We obviously haven't delivered a full audit. We will not charge the full scale rate, is my proposal, but there have been a number of additional costs we have incurred. So I've just set that out in terms of how that works its way through, and that will, the impact of that will look like. But I say that will need to go through a PSAA fee approval process. So that's the ISA 260. Do you want me to pause at that before I go into value for money?
I think that's probably a good point for me to bring Anna in, just to say anything she might want to before I bring members in, and then we'll come back to value for money. Thank you.
Not a lot to say, Chair. I think the committee can see that I've taken these recommendations very seriously. One of the very first things that I did was build the team, as I said previously, and Paul I got Paul in pretty quickly to support me in doing that. So I have to thank everybody that I've brought in. I have to thank the auditors. They've been really supportive. They've understood, obviously, written down the situation as it is, but have been really good to work with. So I think we've established now a pretty good relationship, and that's very critical for me in this role, to have a good relationship with the auditors, because it makes for a much better working environment. So I'm just working through them. I always want to go faster and harder, but I have to realise that it's all the same people doing the same things, and we've all got the same priorities, but we're completely aligned to what the auditors, and I know the committee, want us to do moving forward, and that's what we're committed to doing.
Thank you. Councillor Dundas.
Thank you, and thank you everybody for the report. I've tried to read most of it. Just to pick up on a couple of points. Firstly, you mentioned how it lays out the audit reset going forward over the next few years, and I think that's really useful and really clear. It gives us a timetable. I was going to say in black and white, but it's actually in blue and white. Good colour. To how we get into a position where certainly, actually, I know we keep mentioning LGR, as councillors here, we will be able to hold our heads high and saying, actually, we have a really good, robust financial basis to go into a new authority. And I appreciate that it does take some time, because the confidence and the assurance around the opening and closing balances have to be obtained over a number of years. You cannot do it overnight. It takes a number of cycles to get to that point. Nonetheless, as a committee, you have your disclaimer, and we're being asked to approve and publish the accounts. What we did in previous years, covering 3 years worth actually, is we agreed to modify our recommended decision to take account of that, to protect us as well, because I think you have to think, well, somebody might read this in 5 years' time and think, what did those, I think there's 7 of us on this committee, what did those people actually do, and what have they actually put their names to? And indeed, some of us work in the finance industry, so we have to be a little bit careful about what we put our names to. So I did distribute some wording in draft format to change our recommended decision to members, and with your permission, Chair, I'd like to put it forward as a proposal. I'm happy to read it out or not.
I'm happy for you to read it out. I have a copy in front of me, but I'm not sure everyone else does. So, does everyone else have a? Does everyone else have a copy? But I think for the record, let's just read it.
I think I probably should. Yes, it is slightly different from last year because last year we used BDO's words. Now, obviously, we don't have BDO anymore. We have KPMG. And actually, I think I've tried to acknowledge looking forward rather than looking back, because I think we need to put this to bed, because we need to devote our energies and our resources to looking ahead in the here and now, rather than spending an enormous amount of time looking at stuff from 2 years ago. So, recommended decision reads as, the committee has recommended 2.1. The committee approves the publication of the 2023-24 Statement of Accounts, noting the 2023-24 Audit Plan, Letter of Representation to be signed by the Section 151 officer, and the 2 audit reports, the Year-End Report to the Governance and Audit Committee, ISA 260 report, and the Auditor's Annual Report, brackets similar content but designed for a wider audience, including the public, close brackets. The Governance and Audit Committee acknowledges that the external auditors have issued a disclaimer of opinion on the Council Statement of Accounts for the year ended the 31st of March 2024. This was because they were unable to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence to provide a basis for an audit opinion. The committee has considered the circumstances that led to the disclaimer and notes the shortcomings identified by the auditors. Whilst recognising the potential for material misstatement, the committee has approved the accounts for publication in accordance with statutory requirements. The committee supports the ongoing programme of improvements to address the issues raised by the auditors and is committed to ensuring timely and accurate financial reporting in future years. And paragraphs 2.2 and 2.3 remain as in the agenda. Now, I would suggest we put that as our written recommended decision, and we add that as a note somewhere in the accounts as well, to be clear what we've said. That's my suggestion.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Dundas. And I think there are 2 things that I need to have addressed before we move forward with that. One, I know Councillor Smith wished to make a slight amendment to the wording, so I'm going to ask him to do that, and then I'll bring Emma in as well to see what her thoughts are about how we publish that. Councillor Smith.
Thank you. Yes, it's a very small amendment. I just note there's no reference back to the historic situation, so I'm thinking that we could add into the second paragraph, which says the committee has considered the circumstances that led to the disclaimer and notes the historic situation and shortcomings identified by the auditors. I think that just gives a little bit more balance to it, in the spirit of the good progress that I've seen, I think the rest of the committee have seen, how well relationships with the auditors have improved compared to some of the discussions we're having with their predecessors. I think this would make a very good stepping stone forward, and we can then move forward.
I think, Chair, if I may come in, I think, obviously there were a number of reasons why this year's accounts were disclaimed, but one of the reasons is there was no assurance around the opening balances because we'd had 3 years of previously disclaimed accounts, so I think that that's a fair amendment.
Right, thank you. I'm glad you've accepted that. So I know that this is not to put you on the spot and KPMG on the spot, but I know that just to remind everyone of the bit of history when we had this issue with the previous 3 years' accounts at the end of last year. There were concerns expressed by most, if not all, members of the committee about publication and agreement to publication without a disclaimer coming from the members of the committee. And I suppose the question that we put to the previous auditors was whether they were comfortable with us adding something to the accounts as published. BDO were not. So I suppose what I'm putting to you, Emma, is whether or not KPMG would be. Our plan B, which is what we resorted to at the meeting in December, was to ensure that a recommendation, or the ultimate recommendation that was minuted, included this form of words so that anybody looking could understand that the committee did have its own concerns as well. Over to you.
So I think I've seen those form of words just before the committee, so I'm relatively comfortable that they are reasonable in terms of the situation. I think publishing them as the recommendation is probably what I would prefer, if I'm honest, but you know, I think we are where we are fundamentally. So we need to move forward. I think what is important, and I know we'll touch on this a bit more when we get to the value for money findings, but actually is the AGS. Because actually you are acknowledging in that AGS a lot of the issues that have been identified which lead to the situations that you are into within the account. So I think when you put those two together, that's a reasonable statement to be making.
Thank you. So I think what I'm hearing back from Emma is that she would probably prefer that we just do what we did last time round. Which I think we were all comfortable with, ultimately, although Councillor Sunnucks is shaking his head vigorously. So at this stage, what I'm going to say is there is a recommendation on the table as accepted for amendment by Councillor Dundas. So we'll discuss very quickly the recommendation as amended, and then I'll come to what we do going with it. So if anybody wants to say anything about the motion that's on the table, please indicate, and then I'll come back to how we deal with it. Anyone wishing to say anything further about the motion? No. In that case, I'm going to put the motion to the vote. All those in favour of the motion? That's unanimous. Thank you. That's the amended motion. Right, now, Councillor Sunnucks.
Yes, I am more than passionately determined that we should put this into the accounts. We should put it into the statement of the council's responsibilities or somewhere else, but we have to say very clearly that we are not approving these accounts. The accounts are not, the errors, casting errors is so polite and so gentlemanly and professional. The accounts are all over the place still, and it's going to be a tremendous job to get them straight next year. And I could go on and on and on about where it is. I don't think that probably members of this committee have read, I've probably read them in more detail than other people have, and I don't feel I'm anywhere near to the bottom of them. These are not possibly accounts that we can approve without a proper qualification or proper explanation. And I actually drafted this wording here, and as gently as I possibly could. These are our accounts. They're not the auditor's accounts. Auditors are always telling us these things, that they're our accounts and we have to take responsibility for them. And particularly with a disclaimed audit report, we should be allowed to make them our accounts, and we should be able to put this in some sensible place and make it clear that we've got, as a committee, reservations about it. Look, remember, we don't get to look at the books. The auditors get to look at the books and they won't put an opinion on it. We don't get to look at the books. I'm a chartered accountant. I can't have my name associated with this stuff. These are not, these accounts are not attached to the business. So please, please, can we all just be realistic? They are our accounts, they're disclaimed by the auditors, it goes in, and then we can move on.
Thank you, Councillor Sunnox. I did have Councillor Naylor. Did you want to speak?
It was actually for a previous point. So if I can just loop back, if I may. I just wanted to, say this committee is often quite rigorous to the point of causing discomfort, which is what we should do. But I just wanted to acknowledge how encouraging it is to hear from KPMG that they feel there is a really noticeable difference in the engagement they're having and how things are going. So I just wanted to say that.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Dundas and Councillor Smith.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Chair, I do understand what Emma's saying, and this it's an irregular situation on many levels. Just listening to people, though, I think if Emma would accept, albeit possibly reluctantly, this phrase or these words going into the accounts, I get the impression we would probably get a unanimous vote from the committee, which I think would be a positive thing. We may well all walk out of the room, perhaps nobody entirely happy, but we would have actually made some progress. We would have got a decision from the committee, a unanimous decision. We would have put this to bed, and we can then move on looking at other stuff. So I would urge us to actually try and come to a unanimous decision, and if Emma will accept it, put them in the account, put the phrase in the accounts, and then we can get on with other things.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Hearing what Councillor Naylor said, particularly about the new relationship, we've been asked nicely by the auditors to do it one way. It's the same way as we did it with the previous ones. I really can't see why we should be going back and causing a problem with the auditors. They've asked us nicely. It doesn't matter one way or the other. We are not happy with these accounts. They're not happy with these accounts. No one's happy with these accounts. That's very clear. So I'm afraid, reluctantly, I couldn't support the recommendation to include them, because I want to keep the good relationship we've got going with the auditors. And as Councillor Naylor said, it's a refreshing change and it's something that I want to see continue.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. It's always good, Chair, to know that my colleagues are listening to every word. While I would say that, and that is absolutely what I think in terms of the relationship, I do think it is also important that we continue to be true to the rigour that's expected of us. And I take note of Councillor Sunnock's professional as well as municipal points. So respectfully, I disagree with Councillor Smith.
Councillor Dundas.
Yeah, I guess, sorry, Emma, we're going to probably put you on the spot. I mean, I suppose the question is, if we did ask for this, do you feel it would have a dramatic negative effect on the relationship?
Can I just stop you there, Councillor Dundas? Because I'm getting a flavour for how this conversation is going, and looking at the time, I'm going to suggest that we break slightly early and that we could have that conversation sotto voce and then come back. Right? It's 7:20, so what I'm going to suggest is that we adjourn at this point in the agenda for 10 minutes, so return at past, please, promptly, and we will pick up at that point. Thank you, everyone. back to the Governance and Audit Committee meeting. I just want to say a very big thank you to our auditors and to our Section 151 officer, as well as council members who've spent a little bit of time coming up with what appears to be an acceptable compromise about how we deal with this, subject of course to the committee as a whole agreeing to that. And I'd just like to say thank you to Emma Larkin and KPMG for being as helpful as they have been. The proposal, therefore, Councillor Dundas, just want to, are you now fully au fait with
I
what's
think
being
so. I understand.
determined?
I understand the proposal is that the words from the recommended decision will be inserted on the accounts, but on a page on their own, on around page 28. Is that correct? Which I think is fairly clear.
And that is acceptable to our auditors and to our Section 151 officer. Councillor Smith.
I would propose an amendment that says that instead of that, it's treated the same way as we did with the previous accounts.
Right, so you're proposing an amendment to that motion. Right,
Yes.
fine. Okay. In that case, I'll have to take the amendment first. Those in favour of the amendment that Councillor Smith is proposing, and that is that in effect we would do what we did back in December with the previous 3 years audit, and it just is a statement in the minutes. Those in favour of the amendment? I have one. Those against? I have three. Abstentions? There's three of us. Okay. In that case, the amendment falls, so we're back now to the substantive motion as moved by Councillor Dundas. Those in favour, please show. Okay, that's 5 of us. Those against, sorry, were you in favour? Councillor Kelly, so that's 6 of us. Those against? Councillor Smith. That means there are, I don't think I've left anyone out, so there are no abstentions. That's carried. Thank you. Right. Move on to the value for money element.
Thank you, Chair. And I just before I hit the value for money, I did just want to say, obviously, the final set of accounts that we will be signing, we have gone back through and checked for all of those casting errors, and they have all been amended. So just to be really clear on that they will not have a load of casting errors still within them. So just on to the next and a final report for the 23-24 year end. This is our auditor's annual report, which is essentially the public-facing document which summarises where we've got to for the annual accounts perspective, but also gives the detailed commentary for value for money. So I won't touch on the financial statement section because we've just been through that, and essentially it is a disclaimed set of accounts. But what we were required to do this year is the full value for money work. So we did the full suite of work, and I suppose just to note that in the previous year, under for the previous auditors, there was a reduction in the level of work that needed to be done under value for money. This is the full scope of work. So you've had the full inspection. So it's a long and lengthy report. I'm not proposing to go through it in detail, but I think what is helpful is just to give you a quick overview of what we look at in terms of the headlines, and then just touch on the areas of risk that we did identify and where we did conclude there was weakness. So just in terms of the areas that the value for money work looks at, so first is around financial sustainability. So this is particularly around looking at your budget setting processes in terms of the governance arrangements over them, understanding areas such as sort of tracking throughout the year, as well as looking at your underlying sort of financial position, use of reserves, etc. We then also look at governance, so that's around risk management, how key decisions are made, importance of risk management. And then we also look at the 3 E's, economy, efficiency and effectiveness, and that is focused on areas sort of more operational, linked to the authority, as well as areas such as savings and waivers. So the report is quite detailed and happy to have any comments, but I'll focus just on the areas where we identified what we call significant risks, which are areas where, based on our risk assessment, we then identified whether there was an area we might need to do a bit more work on to understand if there was a weakness in the arrangements. So if I just start on page 303, so the first area we identified was just around some of the risk management procedures, just to identify how some of that reporting was concluded. So whilst we identified that there was some work that could be improved in some of that, it wasn't identified as a significant weakness in arrangements, and management have accepted our recommendations in that area. The second one is linked to the fraud risk process. So again, we've sort of touched on that already. That's the one that's been fed through the AGS and through our previous report, so I won't touch on that. Again, recommendation has been accepted by management. Third area was around sort of the financial reporting. I think this was commented on earlier in terms of the Q3 reporting, so just identifying that there is quite a lag in terms of some of that financial reporting. So Anna, as she's already said, is fully aware of that and is already implementing a process to improve that process, but that has been identified as a weakness in the 23-24 year. The next one is just around the oversight of the council assets. So there was SIPFA review where there was a number of recommendations made to the authority. Within 23-24, those recommendations were not implemented or sort of fully addressed. So again, that has been identified as a weakness in arrangements. And then one we have touched on quite significantly is just on page 310, so it's around the capability and capacity of the finance team. Again, I won't go into that one, but again, fully accepted and is a significant weakness for the 23-24 year. The sixth risk was around procurement and contract management. So again, identifying some findings from the internal audit reviews that had been happening and some improvements needed around that process, and particularly following up with some of those internal audit findings, because you had a process through which those internal audit findings have been tracked, reported and monitored. We haven't raised a significant weakness in that area. And the last one is just linked to the Northern Gateway, so recognising some of the challenges with that development and how that has been sort of overseen. So we haven't this year raised a significant weakness, but we are sort of flagging that there is some progress in that area that needs to be made, and that sort of continues to be monitored, and we'll be revisiting that this year. So all of those recommendations that we have raised have all been accepted by Anna and the team, and they have also, as Hayley said earlier, reflected in the AGS. So the reason we asked for that is obviously we've identified significant weaknesses in some of your arrangements during the 23-24 year, and therefore we would expect your AGS to reflect those findings in terms of we've reported significant weaknesses to the committee, and therefore we would expect you to reflect those. So changing that timeline of the AGS will sort of amend that 1 year issue we've had this time. So that's all I was going to say on the value for money. As I appreciate it's a long report, but happy to have any questions.
Thank you. And I think most of us will recognise, if not all of us will recognise just about every one of those from our work over the last couple of years. And so I'd like to thank you for that, and I'm sure I have no doubt that when we have one of our regular in confidence meetings with you, we will find out how well we are doing against those. Questions and comments. Councillor Naylor, then Councillor Sunnox.
Thank you, Chair. Northern Gateway, it's concerning us all, I'm sure. I wonder if you are able to just go into a little bit more explanation of what you mean by revisiting it this year. I'm just conscious, obviously, we have members of the public watching potentially, and they may be curious what's meant by that.
Yep. So the reason we've looked at this is it's a large project development that's been undertaken by the authority. So we look at it through a sort of governance lens, through ensuring that there is reasonable reporting, robustness of any risks been identified. So given that it's an ongoing project, we will come back to it and look at the progress that's been made through 24-25 in terms of how that project is progressing, but also how any issues may have been reported.
Right. Councillor Sunnock's next.
Yes, also on Northern Gateway. The risks, our risk register never mentions any projects, and one of the pieces of work we're hoping to get to is to have a project risk register, and I hope you will add a little push to that, as we've been waiting for a project risk register for a little while now. Disclosure on the Northern Gateway. My belief is you can get away with disclosing it. It's not that there's 70 million of debt not on the balance sheet, and it's a legally binding commitment. It's definitely risks and rewards have been transferred over to the council, so eventually it will have to go on the balance sheet. I think that this year you can probably get away with just a note, but I'm not sure whether the note we were going to put in, has it actually been put in the accounts that we're blessing? Well, then I feel that's something we should try and get a note, and we've got some words somewhere.
In the 23-24 accounts, we've got a contingent liability. The full disclosure will happen in 24-25. That's how we've got around that, Councillor Sunnock.
So have we got the contingent liability in the accounts we've blessed?
Yes, you have.
Where is it?
It's in the contingent liability note, whatever note that is.
And they're the ones that were, yeah.
Correct.
Okay, I will look.
Yeah, I recall, I know I've burned the midnight oil looking through these, and I recall something in there, but I couldn't for the life of me remember where it was at the moment. Councillor Dundas.
Yeah, just very briefly, just to really echo what the people said, I think most of what's in here, personally, I think it's well written, and I think it's very accurate, but I'm pleased to say I think it tells us what we already knew in that sense, but it's good to have it confirmed. Just on Northern Gateway, and I don't want to labour the point, there is a figure put in here which I think is from, it's mentioned at the time of writing the report. That doesn't reconcile with the Q3 budget monitoring report we looked at earlier, just to make you aware.
All right, well spotted. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you. I've got 4 related questions, which all sort of relate to fees. The first one is you've set out 2 fee schedules, one on page 239 and one page 276. I was wondering if you could just clarify what those, because they're different, what they are. And then on that point, you make a comparison to the BDO fees, and your fees are way higher. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't be high. I'm just wondering why they're a lot higher, because I would want to know that as just a layperson. And then on page 239, you've got a set of risks laid out for things that might affect your billing. And I'm wondering if I can get some assurance that some of the risks that you've identified, that are historic risks that you can't do anything about because they've happened, whether those risks could then impact on your set of things that could affect your ability to do the work, but there's obviously nothing we can actually do about it because the risks have already occurred. And if that's the case, if one of those extenuating circumstances that you list on page 239 were to occur, how does that impact on the charging structure that you do? I mean, how is that billed? What's the penalty to us effectively if this happens?
Okay, so there's lots of different pages there. So let me just, if I start with the fees, so on page, so for this year's fees, which are on what page of this year's fees? 27. So the fees for the 23-24 year end, which are the ones documented in the ISA 260 appendix, which let me just get there on page 276. So let's start with a couple of questions. So you've got the fee at the top table, so the 160. That is the fee that will be charged for this year. The scale rate fee, so the fee that we were entitled to bill you for a full audit, is the one that's noted in the table before as the 189. We then had a number of additional fee variations for things that took longer. So one being the value for money, the fact that value for money fees in the scale rate are set assuming that there are no significant risks identified. We identified 8. So therefore that took additional work and time to be done. We then also obviously had to issue a disclaimer which involves a level of technical sign-off through to an individual opinion. So there's an element of fee variation for those. So that is your sort of total fee. So we essentially took the 189, reduced it, and then added some back on, which gets you to the 160. The difference between the BDO fees, so your 22, 23, so there was a re-procurement, that's why I sit here as your auditor. So the PSAA, who's the body for appointing all auditors to local government, went out for tender. They are the new scale fees. I have no impact or ability to influence those scale fees, but that's the fees that they have set. So what I would say is that since that previous tender went out, the world of audit has significantly shifted, and that is why those fees have increased. And actually, if you looked across any sector, you'd have seen quite a significant increase in audit fees over the sort of last 10 years. So that hopefully answers the first 2 questions. In terms of the set out in our plan that we have, which was one of the earlier things, that what we set that out for is essentially saying these are our expectations of what we would think should happen in terms of being able to deliver an audit. So the fact that we are given strong working papers, the fact that we have decent set of stat accounts. I mean, I haven't charged additional fee for the fact that we had to recast the accounts multiple times, but you know, that wouldn't be something I'd expect to see next year, to be fair, because Anna will have that sorted. But you know, they would be the things that would add additional fees, and I would have to put those through as a fee variation. All fee variations under the current structure have to be approved by the PSAA, but I would agree them with Anna if I had any fee variations, and then I would have to go through a cycle of getting those approved by the PSAA. So it's not something I could just say to you, I'm going to charge you a fee. They do add an element of challenge to ensure that there is consistency across fee variations being charged. But we do, you know, my expectation is we get a decent set of accounts, otherwise additional costs are incurred because things take us longer than what we have budgeted for. Did you have a final question? Was there one more?
The legacy risks that we couldn't do anything about.
So is that in terms of the value for money, or the legacy risks on?
So the risks that you've identified that we were just talking about a minute ago, those which are from 23, 24, obviously they've happened, and we've taken steps to prevent them from happening again in the future. But obviously they did happen, and therefore whether or not those risks, which may have been there, if they then impact on 239, you've got essentially a set of bits on page 239. The basis of fee information there, you've got subject to the following assumptions. If those assumptions were affected by some of those risks, how that would be handled.
So the risks that we've just talked through, so those 8 risks I've pulled through, are value for money risks. You will have follow-ups on all of those risks next year because they were risk areas that we identified, and certainly work on some of those areas of weakness. So there will be additional costs for the value for money because the scale fee assumes that there is no additional value for money risk sat within there. It's essentially saying that you have nothing other than you've got a clean value for money basis. So what we will see though is obviously we've got a good baseline of understanding of the authority now. We know where some of those risks lie, so I wouldn't necessarily expect that fee variation to be as much going forward. So you'd hope to see that come down. Having said that, obviously if we identified a new risk and we needed to do some more work, then we would need to go through a process of if we needed to have a fee variation.
Thank you for that comprehensive response, Emma. I think it's fair to say that the PSA scale fees are negotiated and agreed at a national level, so they're not in either the auditors or the council's hands. Right, I think that was everyone, unless I've missed someone's hand. No. We've dealt with the recommendation. We've completed that. We've gone through the statement of accounts. We've grilled our auditors. We've had comment from our Section 151 officer. So I think we're finished with item 8.3. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you both for your attendance this evening, unless there is one more thing you want to raise with it.
So we've just got the 24-25 now.
Ah, true. Thank you. It's been a long item.
And I'm going to give you the rest of my voice and let Hannah take you through that.
Perfect, thank you. I guess I'll take the paper largely as read, but I think it's just important that we pull out kind of the key risks that we've identified, having kind of done a lot of the work around the planning and risk assessment procedures. And I guess to echo a lot of what has been said, actually the fact that we've been able to get to that point already is just really indicative of the work that Anna's been putting in with her team since she's come in and being able to present it today. So the key risks that we've pulled out are outlined on page 6 of our report, and page 332 of the pack. So they relate to the valuation of firstly the land and buildings and also the investment properties that are held by the council. So a lot of that is due to the value of those properties, but also the estimates that are involved in the valuations. So we have got, as pulled out on kind of our list of specialists, we've got our own internal valuations team that will hopefully have involved this year to really kind of test those assumptions that come through in the reports that you get from your own kind of external valuation specialists. The next one is over management override of control. So this is a standard risk that you will see in every single one of our audit plans, and this is linked to the kind of unique position of management. So this is largely linked to the work that we will do around sort of journals testing and those postings that have been made, linked to our specific high risk criteria that we will develop for Colchester. And also just a review of estimates, firstly if they've been made kind of in a sensible way, but also to then have a look at the aggregate to see if they are sitting kind of more to the cautious or optimistic end of the range. You'll see we've then got 2 risks in relation to pensions. So firstly in relation to the valuation of the obligations, but also to the recognition of the net pension asset. And that, I think, is something we've seen as a bit of a shift, actually, with a lot of assets coming onto the balance sheet to make sure they're being recorded in the correct way. So similarly to with our valuations team, we've also got our specialist pensions team that we will have involved in this work. So we don't really rely on the work that's done at the county council level, and we do test the specific work that is done for the Colchester notes themselves. And finally, the last risk we have is then around expenditure recognition. So you'll see that we actually rebut the fraud risk around the income side, and we've set out the key reasons for each of those income streams as to why we think that those are limited in terms of their kind of fraud risk, but actually say that the key area where this may be manipulated is around the expenditure side, as opposed to the income. So those are the key bits I wanted to pull out in terms of the risks. Obviously, there is the value for money kind of process that we'll go through. At this point, we've not completed our value for money work for 24-25. I think it's worth reflecting that at the point in time that we completed the work for 23-24, we had covered a lot of the 24-25 financial year. So, as Emma said, we will do the follow-up on those reviews, but it's quite likely that as a point in time, and when we reflect on 24-25, a lot of those conditions will still have been in place, at least for a significant proportion of the financial year. And then the last piece, I guess, to kind of pull out is around the audit cycle and timetable. So I say it's really good today that we can be bringing our draft audit plan, and once we've completed all of the value for money work, we can bring kind of a final version of that can include the full value for money risk assessment commentary. We've been discussing with Anna and Paul as well whether we've got kind of the capacity to bring forward some of that work into the summer as well. So with a plan to start the final field work in September, but actually to see if we can bring forward some of those pieces around pensions and asset valuations to start to give yourselves kind of the assurance over some of those key risk areas as well. Similar to the current, the 23-24 financial year, we've got kind of a backstop date as at the end of February. So whilst we will kind of hopefully conclude a lot of our field work prior to the end of 2025. We will also then look to use that period up until February 2026 to just continue to rebuild some of that assurance piece over the previous years as well. But happy to take any questions on our 24-25 plan.
Thank you for that. I'm just mindful of time, members, so if we can keep this short and sweet, and I was just going to say I will liaise with Matthew Evans about when we're going to meet with our auditors in closed session. Councillor Smith.
Yes, I was intrigued on the pensions. You said you were looking at the Colchester rather than the county council. Given that we have a common pension fund, aren't the risks going to be the same? Could you explain where that comes from, please?
Yeah, sorry, so it's not that we're looking, so obviously you have a portion of the county council pension fund. What other auditors have previously done is rely on the work of the auditor of the pension fund. That we have seen can add some delays in the process. We have designed our procedures where we can do that work just from a Colchester perspective, so we don't need to be reliant on other auditors. So it's a more efficient process in our perspective.
Thank you. Councillor Naylor.
Thank you, Chair. Just caught my eye was number 6 in your risk, fraud risk from expenditure recognition. And then you've got a figure that perhaps others recall seeing before, but I don't, saying that you've noted that the council's utilised 22% of its usable reserves to support a balanced budget. I mean, I find that figure quite concerning. I just wondered if you can give some more context around that. And a second point, do you have any useful insights from benchmarking from other local authorities about whether that is usual? Thank you.
I'll let Emma pick up the point on the benchmarking because I know she's got a broader range of entities that she works with. But I guess from the piece around the reserves, actually, if you look back over those 4 years, there was quite a significant increase in the council's reserves as a result of funding. And actually, if you look through the value for money commentary on the reserves, it really reflects that uptick. So actually, it's really bringing the council back down to a much more aligned position with where it was at prior to COVID. Whilst acknowledging the fact it's bringing it back down to a steady state, we do still acknowledge it as a risk and something that we will do our audit procedures over, but not something that we look at as a really key area of concern because it is reflecting that increase and then actually bringing back down to a steady state.
And it is just also mentioned, so the fraud risk over the expenditure recognition, we will do some further risk assessment procedures. So this is presented to you as a draft plan. I have, on a number of my other auditors, actually seen this risk fall away actually when we go and do a bit more deep dive into some of the expenditure streams, actually the level of fraud risk that actually sits within some of those expenditure streams. So keep an eye, we might come back to this one. In terms of benchmarking, currently we haven't done a lot because we've obviously just 1 year in and the state of the audit market is challenging, but certainly something we are looking to do in the future in terms of sharing benchmarking across our base.
Thank you. And Councillor Sunnox.
Yes, I too worry that we're going to get ourselves bogged into too much detail on pension. The council, when real interest rates were negative, the council had huge liabilities which it didn't recognise, and now that they're positive, we've got the potential for huge assets. And I thought that our approach was not to recognise those either, and that we were going to just put a big zero on it. If we put a big zero on it, does that save you some work and us some cost?
Simple answer is no, unfortunately. So the recognition of a surplus asset is actually quite difficult to actually recognise. There are quite a lot of criteria to be able to recognise an asset, but they do exist. So therefore, if you didn't recognise an asset, we would still make sure that that was the appropriate thing to do, that you shouldn't actually be recognising a large asset, and if you did have an asset, we would need to say that you didn't. What I will say, though, is that we do, as Hannah mentioned earlier, we have a specialist team. It's called our Pension Centre of Excellence. They have a very large amount of experience in audited LGPS pension schemes. We've got quite a standardised, well-practiced, well-rehearsed set of procedures, and we do a number of authorities, for example, throughout Essex. So therefore, the common procedures that need to be done for the county, we do, and that is centrally shared. So we're not doing, for example, the same procedures on every single authority multiple times. So there is efficiency built in, but no, we do still need to do the level of work that we need to do. Actions.
Right, thank you. That's everyone. And now I think we have dealt with everything under this item, so I'll draw it to a close. Thank you very much for your attendance and contributions this evening. Anna, I don't know whether you're staying for the next item. You are, all right. Is Simon online? Yes. Yeah. I know he's in the room. Yeah, that's fine. Andrew? Actually, just before we move on to that, I'm just thinking there's no reason why we shouldn't, in the public section, also deal with the work programme. Is there anything? I think we'll just get the work programme out of the way. Andrew, apologies. Anything anyone wants to raise in there for now? I mean, it's early on, so we can amend it if necessary next meeting.
Sorry, Chair, just to clarify, the work programme only deals with this municipal year, so this is the last meeting.
Yeah, it's
so
true.
We'll come back next year with a fresh one.
In that case, work programme dealt with. Move on, Andrew.
Okay, thank you, Chairman, and good evening, committee. I'll be very brief on this report, Chair. So I think you could really take the report as read, but I will just highlight one or two key issues for you. So this is the first shareholder report that we have produced. It's good practice to do it, so that's why we have striven to produce this report for you this year. It's backward looking, in the sense it's looking back to what the committee has achieved and officers have achieved, working in close partnership with the council's companies really over the past year. And the report highlights several things and achievements that we have done. So I won't go through all of those. But what I would like to do is just to mention a couple of issues around the, first of all, I'd like to highlight the work of the officer shareholder team. Now, I don't think the report really details exactly what its purpose is, who's on it, and what it's achieved. So, just to be clear for you, the officer shareholder team comprises the Chief Operating Officer, who is the senior shareholder representative of the council, Hayley McGrath, myself, Anna as Section 151, Simon as the Managing Director of Colchester Commercial Holdings Limited, and Philip Sullivan as the Chief Executive of Colchester Borough Homes. And it's got a very tight remit. And what it looks at are risks, governance issues, and perhaps most importantly, the finances. Now, it's not a shadow shareholder committee in that sense. What it is it's designed to be a safe forum for representatives from both companies and the council to discuss any issues, concerns, and explore any potential opportunities prior to them being brought before members for a decision. So that is the purpose of the shareholder team. Now, earlier on in your meeting this evening, you approved the minutes from your meeting on the 31st of January this year. Now, in those minutes, you approved the Colchester Commercial Holdings Action Plan update. And in that report, and with those minutes, you agreed and you signed off all of the actions that were contained within the ethical consulting report and the CIPFA report. So that back in January, you were satisfied that all of the one-off actions that were required under both reports were completed, and any reoccurring actions would be contained in business as usual reporting going forward. So, Chair, the report itself, as I say, is looking back. It's looking at our governance arrangements. It's looking at the things that you agreed specifically around CTHL, around the hibernation of the subsidiary companies. It looks at the reports that you received, and it looks at what we will be doing in the future in the shareholder role. So, Chair, that's all I wanted to say on that, and the recommendation is for you to consider the report and comment on anything you would like additionally going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weavers. I must admit, it either has passed me by, or I've completely overlooked it, that there was a shareholder group, and when I saw this, I thought, what is that? And should this committee not get some sort of feedback from that shareholder group at least once a year, just to see what might have happened? So I think that's the first point that I would start at in terms of this report. I'll open up to other members of the committee. Anyone? Councillor Sunnox.
Yes, I've always been bemused about how we exercise the shareholder role, and I can see that we've now got a shareholder committee, we've got a governance and audit committee, and then I think there's a proposal to try and remove the shareholder role from the governance and audit committee and put it onto the cabinet. And I'd like to say that, some questions to ask about that. Will the cabinet have bandwidth? Will it have the ability to scrutinise that this committee has? Will it be able to look at the accounts? Would it, for example, have picked up the wretched mess up over the tax? Would it have picked that up, which, we instantly picked up? And do we run a council where if someone can do something, you take it away from them and give it to someone who can't? I would raise questions about that. If there's a shareholder, if there's an officer group focused on it, then all the better, so long as that supplements and doesn't duplicate. The other point I wanted to raise is that I hadn't realised, so we signed off the CIPFA report in January, and then the outstanding items, and I can't remember whether it was the CIPFA report or the ethical consulting report, said we need to sort the board out. So I think what you're saying, first of all, have we signed off the ethical consulting report? Has that now officially finished? And the idea is that we put all those things onto the regular agenda, so the sorting out the board is still on that agenda. It hasn't been lost. Thank you very much.
Okay. Anyone else? Councillor Kelly.
What Councillor Sunnox just mentioned about the moving of the shareholder responsibility away from this committee to the cabinet, that's the first I've heard of it. That's not to say I've not heard of it. And I'm wondering, when we're talking about different things here. We've got this committee, we've got the cabinet, and we've got the officer group. Whether there's some sort of amalgamation of those three things that could be put together, where you get the most appropriate people who can act as those shareholders somewhere. I'm just sort of thinking aloud here, such that the council, the people, the residents, the proxy, the shareholders by proxy, get the best representation in relation to their theoretical investment, I suppose. So that was just an idea I wanted to throw out there, having heard what was just said.
Thank you, Councillor Kelly. I think I'll leave Mr. Weavers to come back, but my understanding, having seen the note that came out to all councillors, there are proposals for constitutional amendments to full council next week, and that is one of them. I was certainly
Chair,
slightly aghast when I saw that, but
Chair, could I just
send it
say
back to you.
that it has not been circulated to all councillors, group leaders have seen it at the moment for consultation purposes, but it's been place marked on the agenda, that's all at this stage.
Councillor Dundas.
Yeah, on that subject, I have to be careful what I say because I understand that, you know, it's not in the agenda yet, but as I understand it, were those proposals to go forward, this will be the last time item 7.1, for example, the growth strategy is overseen by this committee, and a significant amount of overseeing of CCHL will be taken away this committee, and I think maybe tonight is a good opportunity for this committee to express its views on whether it thinks that's a good idea or not. We have item 7.1 is described as amphora growth strategy. Now that implies, which is probably positive, that amphora is to grow and is going to become financially more significant to the council. And I would say that is rather contradicts the idea that you do that and then you remove a degree of scrutiny of it. And I think perhaps that might be something we're slightly uneasy about.
I think there may be one or two of us around the table who might share that view, but obviously we'll have the opportunity to consider, debate and decide at a full council meeting. Did I see another hand? No? Okay. Councillor Naylor.
Yeah, Chair, thank you. Just for the record, because this is our last G&A before that decision is debated, I too would like to add my concern to the proposal, which I think is not actually in the best interests of the residents that we represent. So just to put that on record, thank you.
Mr. Weavers.
Chair.
I think the leader wants to come in as well.
I sit at the back to do some listening. I've done some listening again tonight, quite a lot of it really. Look, on the last matter, and the way we have to work is as cross-party, as frank as we can. That's the best of G&A and the best of scrutiny, isn't it? Which is why scrutiny in this place, unlike other councils, is chaired by the opposition, rightly, and why when we talk about transparency, we bring here stuff, in my view, in a very transparent fashion, and we take the debate as helpful. So to the issue of what to do around CCHL, the proposal, which clearly I did see in draft, was circulated with a couple of prompts from me, no reply, circulated, and we got started to get a response which was quite reasonable, which was in the balance of this. As an executive function, you could attach it as a subcommittee to Cabinet, but you had to have two things. It was the last, if I can say this to you directly, Paul, the last conversation you and I had, you made 2 points which I completely get and could have said, but you said them to me faster than I could say them to you, which is we had to have assurance for governance and audit that you have time to do your wider role. But when you look at audit and accounts, absolutely that has to include CCHL. When it comes to scrutiny, which is inside that paper, and the last way I saw it, that CCHL does not escape scrutiny, it absolutely continues to have scrutiny. So this, from my perspective, is more where the different roles are applied. CCHL really matters. CCHL cannot just be a closed-door executive function of Cabinet. We work much better there and much more richly. We have to have challenge and we should welcome it. I do. So this is about where these tasks are undertaken. We haven't got the time for it now, Chair, I suspect, but all I would just say to colleagues who have seen the paper, please come back and say, when you've seen it as revised, whether it will work for you or whether or not you want to change. And we've got just about enough time. Everything is running a little late this year to have a look at it before the papers are published. So to make that request, but give
Thank you,
that
David.
assurance.
Andrew, back to you before we close this down and move on to the next?
Just very, very quickly then, so let's just recap. The role of governance and audit at the moment is to act as an advisor to Cabinet. The shareholder role in relation to the council-owned companies always has been, always will be an executive function. So the decision, the ultimate decision, even if we kept everything the same, remains with the Cabinet, with the executive, not here. So this committee, if we decided, no, we don't want to change, but this committee will still only be acting in an advisory role. It's not making decisions around the council's company. So just want to make that point clear. But also, if there isn't agreement between the groups on it, it can be removed from the annual meeting agenda.
Thank you. I think it's useful to remind us, and I know, in fact, if you look at our recommendation on 7.1 is to review and make recommendations to Cabinet. So I think we've always been aware of that. I'm conscious of time, members, so unless there's anything really that you want very quickly, Councillor Dundas, and then I'm going to close this one off.
Just very, very briefly, I think it's good to have the reminder, but I think this, this committee's always understood that the ultimate strategic direction of the council is the responsibility of the executive. I think we get that, and I think we've always understood that. What we do here is scrutinise what CCHL has been doing, and hopefully make positive suggestions, which may or may not be taken up. The question is whether that's best done here, where we also look at the accounts of CCHL, or whether it's best done at scrutiny. I've taken some soundings from people, and I will get back to the leader of the council, having spoken to my group, but perhaps it's a good opportunity for this committee to say whether we feel that we are the right people to scrutinise it or not. I personally think, looking at everything else scrutiny does, it's working, and there's a big part of me kind of feels if it's not broken, why are we trying to fix it, or what are we trying to fix? But I'll make my other comments in private.
Thank you. And I'm just mindful, I hadn't appreciated that not all members had seen what I had seen. So I'm mindful that we don't get into that discussion and debate that others may not have the full facts around. So with that in mind, I'm going to move us to the report just to consider. I don't think we had any recommendations, just to consider the report. And review and comment we've done. Request to make recommendations. I think we've made our views, or most of our views, fairly clear this evening. I say the only one that I would do if this committee is still going to have responsibility as the shareholder auditor and advice, that I'd like to see a report coming from that little governance group at least once a year, so that we know what they're doing in terms of feeding in. All agreed? Right, thank you. That closes 7.2. Thank you, Mr. Weavers. We'll move on to item 7.1, which is the Amphora growth strategy. Welcome all. I'm just going to ask you all to quickly introduce yourselves and your roles so that the general public understand who's making a presentation to us at this stage. I'll start with you, Councillor Warnes, as Chair of the Board.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm Councillor Martin Warnes. I'm the Chair of the CCHL Board, and to my right is my Director colleague, Councillor Vanessa Moffat. To my left is our Managing Director, Simon Coward, and further to the left is Alistair Wilson, who manages the trading company. Just before we start, Chair, Simon's going to just offer you the opportunity not to take the presentation, if you so wish, because of time constraints, assuming that all of you have read and digested the document.
Councillors, I think that probably makes sense. I'm also going to suggest, councillors, that we don't take the recommended decision in the open forum, but that we just ask Councillor Warnes and Simon Coward to do their introductions in public, and that then we move to the closed session where we can discuss and comment on the matters that are confidential. Everyone agreed? Yeah, thank you. Okay, so Councillor Warnes, if I can ask you to do your introduction, and then I'll pass on to Simon to do yours, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just locating the document. Okay, I've just set the context of what presentation would have been, and it would have been around the 24-25 focus and achievements of Colchester Commercial Holdings and its subsidiaries. And in doing so, I'd point out that it says in the report that Amphora's core businesses are identified as delivering best practice. Colchester Events is identified as being an outstanding council-owned events and venue management company that other councils have benchmarked to. Colchester Fibre is the largest council-owned fibre network in the UK, and Helpline is a respected, best-in-class council-owned full service. And in terms of context, CAL, known as the energy company, and CAL, known as the homes company, are now hibernated, and the estates team has been transferred back to the council. Focus over the last 12 months has been on developing Catel, the trading business, and this has been done through consolidating the Amphora businesses into the town hall, so that is where they're all based, achieving overhead and cost savings of 210,000 in 24-25, with a target to cut further, by generating revenue of 6.6 million, achieving an operating surplus of 566.6 thousand, exceeding the target of 338.8 thousand, and it has been delivering impact through running 620 events, attracting 232,000 and 20 visitors, including 25,000 visitors to the Christmas show, The Elf. Helpline and CCTV monitored 2,863 incidents, handled 717 calls from the ambulance service, and achieved an average of 50 minutes response time, and through the new city centre 5G network. And I'll now pass you over to Simon, the Managing Director.
Thank you.
So really just to add to the Chair's comments, so we've provided with you today a draft growth strategy and a baseline 5-year forecast, and then draft financial performance report on 24-25. Thank you.
Thank you. So just for anyone who might be watching, I'll make it clear that the recommendation and the decision that's taken on that recommendation will be published with the published minutes for tonight's meeting. But the next part of the meeting we are going to hold in confidential session. So with that in mind, I'm going to move the exclusion of the public in accordance with section 100A, small 4 of the Local Government Act 1972, to exclude the public, including the press, from the meeting, so that any items containing exempt information, for example, confidential personal, financial or legal advice, in Part B of this agenda, can be decided. Agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much.